Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Talk to Your Family About Their Finances. This is a really important topic that more and more people are bringing to our attention in terms of the internal dynamics with their family and how to handle situations where, parents or kids might be having financial issues or might not even be aware that there are potential financial issues down the road. And so this is all about understanding where your parents or kids may be coming from and the importance of talking to them about their finances and strategies and tactics for how to actually do that. So just a quick disclaimer, obviously 4J Wealth Management is not providing advice in this webinar. This is for informational purposes only. If you have specific questions, you can always contact us. And you also should always contact your legal and tax professionals before making any decisions or acting on any of the information heard today. So the first question is, why is it so difficult to talk about money? And the reason is that these are, money is personal. And so it's a very emotional conversation, and dependency, right? When you're talking about parents aging, long-term care, assisted living, dependency is an emotional topic, and health is a very emotional topic. So families tend to avoid them because they're afraid that conflict's going to emerge, right? When we don't know how to handle something, we generally just kick the can down the road in hopes that there won't be an issue. But that obviously is not a good strategy, nor is it a healthy one. So how taboo a topic is money. It was ranked the #1 taboo topic in an interview that the Capital Group, which is the parent company of American Funds, did a survey involving 1,200 Americans, and they found that marriage problems, mental illness, drug addiction, race, sex, politics, and religion were all considered not as taboo as money. So money was the #1, and this was across genders, across generations, earnings, retirement savings, debt. Money more broadly was considered the most taboo topic, and the most prevalent reason is that it's none of your business, right? So we've all grown up in a culture where money is considered private, it's personal, and we don't really talk about it, right? It's to be avoided, even within our own family. Daniel Crosby, who's a leading behavioral finance expert, said it's such a loaded conversation and there's so much subtext and hidden meaning wrapped up in money. And so we're going to talk more about what exactly that means, because to most people, money is just, what they have in their 401k account, what they have in their savings account, or maybe even, what they have in terms of liabilities. But we start to develop beliefs about money at very young ages as children. And those beliefs that we have around money get solidified over time and can drive sometimes very poor decision-making with regard to our money. So it's the importance of talking to your parents about their finances. Obviously, time is of the essence, because when parents are making decisions and getting documents in place, they have to be of sound mind, right? And if they're not of sound mind, then basically it's too late. So if you wait until the emergency or crisis happens, it's probably too late. It is too late to get these documents in place. We wrote a piece that was published in 60andMe on top estate planning considerations and why you should take care of this. And from a child standpoint in regards to their parents, caregiving of a parent is a logistical issue, it's an emotional issue, and it's a monetary issue. So even if your kids have the means to help you financially, there's a logistical component, right? If they're not living in the same state, or they have a family and a job and a life, it might not be so easy for them to just drop all of that and take care of you as the parent, or take care of their parents. So if you do not wish, if you not have a conversation about what your parents want, how will you be able to carry out their wishes, right? So the more clarity you can get on what's important to them and asking the right questions, the better you're going to be able to carry out what they want in their legacy. And obviously, the sooner you do this, the better, because as people age, they can become more forgetful, less cogent, less clear on what's important to them. So how to have the conversation? I think a really good starting place, if you're thinking about approaching mom and dad, if you have a sibling or siblings, is to start and talk to your siblings, explain why you want to have the conversation, and make sure you get them on the same page. What you don't want to have happen is to go and talk to mom and dad without talking to your siblings, and then your parents bring it up to your sibling, Johnny had this conversation with us, and we're doing these things, because they're going to feel blindsided, and they may even feel like you're trying to take advantage of the situation or boost your inheritance, which is obviously not the goal of these conversations. The other thing you want to make sure that when you have the conversation, you're not doing it in the middle of a birthday party, or after a long stressful day or stressful event. You want to do it when everyone is relaxed, emotions are not running high. I think a good analogy is you can do it over Thanksgiving weekend, right? Maybe Saturday or Sunday morning over Thanksgiving weekend when the family's together, but you wouldn't want to do it at Thanksgiving dinner, right? So that's the way that you should think about having this conversation. And then how to actually start the conversation. That's always the hardest part, is that first step. And so we have some suggestions here for different approaches, and depending on your personality and the family dynamics, some of these approaches are going to feel more applicable than others. One approach is just come out directly and say to your parents, I've been thinking about, your retirement, or getting, basically, what would you most like to have happen in our family when you're at the end of your life, right? What type of care do you want, and how can we all help you with that? You could approach it by asking for advice, right? Maybe you're more hesitant. You don't think your parents are going to be as forthcoming. You can say, I'm thinking about getting my estate planning documents done. Any words of advice? A lot of times when you put someone in a position of authority, it puts them at ease, and they can let down their guard and share more information. You could talk about your own financial planning experience. You could say, listen, we met with our financial planner, or we have friends who went through this with their parents, and here was the result, here were the benefits. So sometimes sharing a story indirectly about friends or your own experience can be helpful. Another option is to talk about what if scenarios. Mom and dad, obviously you guys are both doing well. You're happy, you're healthy, you're active, but I just want to make sure that we can accommodate, or we're there for you if anything happens. So, what if you needed long-term care in your older age? What are your plans for that? And that's particularly relevant for women, because women tend to be greater users of long-term care because they tend to live longer, right? They live longer than men. And so oftentimes there's a surviving widow, and then they need long-term care. And if you haven't clearly thought out how you want to be cared for and what your plans are, your kids it's going to be much more difficult for them to help. And another option to start the conversation is just to offer to lighten their load. Would it help if I took on the responsibility for automating paying your monthly bills? Okay. All those are different approaches that you can use to kind of open the door to start having these conversations. And it's not all going to happen in one meeting. It's very likely going to take a series of meetings and time before you're able to understand what your parents want, what their situation is, assets, liabilities, and be able to step in if needed. So to start with, what information do you need to know? If you're on limited time and you just want to kind of start and get to the core of it, you want to ask questions around estate planning documents. Do you have a last will and testament and/or a living trust? Do you have a power of attorney? Right? Who is the power of attorney where if you're unable to make financial decisions, this is the person who's going to step in? Do you have an advanced healthcare directive, right? Who's going to make healthcare decisions if you're incapacitated? Who's going to make decisions regarding end of life care? A living will is a part of that advanced healthcare directive as well. And then lastly, how do you pay your bills, right? Knowing what bills they have and what account they pay it out of is hugely helpful, because if something happens, those bills aren't going to stop. And if you don't know what the bills are or how to pay them, you're not going to be of much help to your parents. And then as time goes on and they're ready to share more, you want to try to get information related to their different sources of income. So you can make sure you know what income is supposed to come in every month, different accounts where they bank, any debts that they have, insurance policies and who the beneficiaries are, their investment accounts, real estate, and final wishes, right? Do they want, what type of funeral service do they want? Do they want a burial or cremation? Do they want to spend time, writing down and relaying not just financial things, but also just life lessons that they want to impart on their kids or grandkids? That can all be a part of this conversation, and we think is incredibly important in order to make sure parents' wishes get carried out. So how does having this information help? Well, obviously, the more information you have, the more you're going to be able to tell how prepared your parents are for retirement. And if they're not prepared for retirement, then there has to be a conversation around, mom and dad, if you do run out of money, either I am, the kids we're prepared to assist, or we're not. And so let's try to figure out if there's a way now to do some planning. Maybe it means selling the house or relocating, downsizing, so that we don't get to the point where you're struggling to make it through retirement. Familiarizing yourself with their accounts, the asset levels, so you know where to look for things when needed. Knowing who currently is part of their financial team, who's their estate planning attorney, who's their CPA, who's their financial planner. We can, as financial advisors, we can provide a great service to beneficiaries or powers of attorney, kids of clients, because we, to a large extent, know not only all the accounts we're managing, but all the accounts that they have. We oftentimes have copies of estate planning documents, so we can help to coordinate and connect you with people that are instrumental in their financial picture. You want to obtain contact information for any major insurance policies, investment accounts. And the other big thing as you're going through this process is you're going to have a good idea if they might be getting taken advantage of. And there's different ways to identify that. We call them red flags. But scamming and with the rise of the internet and everything being connected digitally, you have a lot more bad actors appearing, taking advantage of the elderly and seniors. About 1 in 20 older Americans have reported being victims of financial exploitation, according to the National Adult Protective Services Association. And estimates from the SEC, although they don't know an exact amount, they think financial abuse can exceed billions of dollars every year. So certain red flags you want to watch out for. One, anytime you get a message or a call about fees to collect winnings, that's an immediate red flag. Calls from quote unquote government agencies, the IRS, Medicare, Social Security, those are always going to be a scam, because if those agencies have information they need from you, or if you're under some sort of an audit, you will always get something in the mail first. So if you ever get calls from government agencies like that, and it catches you off guard, you can just politely say, I have to go, and hang up. And you can always get in contact with the IRS or Social Security Administration directly, look up their direct number and inquire. But it will always come in the form of a letter from a government agency. Emergency calls from grandkids. There's a lot of scams out there involving a purported grandchild, being out of the country or out of the area, and they're in need of money, and it's urgent, and they can't talk on the phone. But without this money, they're gonna not make it, or they're gonna be stuck where they are. So obviously, these people know that the grandkids are a soft spot for their grandparents. So any sort of emergency call like that, take a moment to say, this is a lot of times a sign of a scam, and take a step back, hang up, and call your kids or grandkids directly. Free lunches, those are often associated with high pressure sales tactics where you get invited to a lunch and they're trying to sell a specific financial product that generally has a very high commission and is not necessarily in your best interest. And then lastly here, and there's more than this, but these are some of the big ones. If someone's trying to sell your parents on high return investments with no risk, that's always a red flag. There's no such term as a high return investment without risk. That's the way it works. So those are some examples of red flags. And in addition, a way to help protect your parents from scammers is to make sure, you know, a lot of seniors prefer to get everything in paper, which is fine, but you also do want to make sure that they at least have set up their online access at their various accounts, because if they haven't, it leaves an opening for a cyber criminal to establish an account with that institution, pretending to be the parents, and then they can try to wreak havoc once they're in the account online. Same thing with Social Security, setting up that Social Security government account so that you prevent impersonators from logging in and pretending to be you through the Social Security Administration, trying to claim Social Security earlier and sending the money to their account. You know, all those are issues. So getting those things set up online can help prevent that. And then number 3 is really big. Definitely do this, even if it's just with one of the credit bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion, or Experian. You can pull a credit report, and we show here an example of a sample credit report from Equifax. And so you can see as you go through this, you can look at all the accounts, right? Lines of credit, mortgage, different debts that you have, your payment history, length of the credit history. And so if anything shows up there that doesn't look correct, or you have a question on, you can go and dispute it. And here's directions on disputing it. You click on the link. This is a government site. You can pull down an online form, or you can mail in the form to you know, in this case, Equifax, and explain, you know, what you're disputing and why you're disputing it. And you have clear directions here on what you should include in your letter, in the dispute letter, to get it resolved. So one of the big topics relating to your parents and retirement is going to surround long-term care. And it's a really challenging conversation to have because people don't want to think about long-term care. They don't want to think about not being able to take care of themselves. And in fact, a nationwide retirement survey from 2018 found 56% of respondents would rather die than live in a nursing home. So the sooner you talk about long-term care, the more time you'll have to plan for it. It's important people understand Medicare does not pay for most long-term care services. Typically, that's short-term hospitalization. And if you don't have this talk, right, you risk that the parents kind of thinking you're going to take care of them if they run out of money or can't afford the type of care they want. And you may be totally unaware that that's what they're thinking or planning on. So a simple way to start the discussion is, I was reading an article about someone who needed around-the-clock long-term care, and it got me thinking, do you have any sort of long-term care insurance or protection? What is your long-term care plan? Have you guys given that any thought? And because it's an emotional topic and parents don't like the idea of role reversal where you're taking care of them, there could be some resistance. So you want to make sure you understand, you can be able to come back and say, look, I realize the last thing you want to think about is going into a nursing home, but over half of long-term care is actually provided in the home. And so having your facts straight about the different types of care that can be received and actual out-of-pocket costs in the area that they live will be very helpful to keep the conversation on track. In 2018, there was an AARP study that found 76% of Americans 50 and older want to stay in their current home as they age. However, just 46% expect they'll be able to stay in their home. And that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because they don't think they'll be able to maintain the home as they get older and it's more difficult, to get around and to do physical labor around the house. And it could also mean just that it's too expensive, that the cost of staying in the house that they're in won't be feasible in retirement. So some key signs that you should talk to your parents about moving sooner rather than later are you're noticing your parent has memory issues. So they're forgetting where things are located. They're forgetting conversations you had. I mean, these are your parents. So if they start to slip, and you think it's persisting or getting worse, you don't want to wait. You want to have that conversation as soon as possible. Perhaps your parent's getting older and is having more health issues. Sometimes these things can happen gradually and then all very suddenly. Mobility. In the DC area, at least, it snows. And as a simple example, if someone's not mobile and it snows 6, 12, 24 inches, are they going to be able to shovel the driveway? Are they going to be able to get out of the house? Are they going to be trapped? What if they lose power? There's all sorts of issues that can emerge as people age in their home. Perhaps the house financial footprint is just too large, right? It costs money to maintain a bigger house and pay the associated costs. Maybe there's yard work, maintenance that needs to be done, things break. It's not cheap. And lastly, and I think most importantly, is isolation, right? If your parents are living in a place they've lived in for a long time, a lot of the people, friends they knew will likely have moved. Maybe they passed away, but there's a real risk, especially in the age of the pandemic we're living through with COVID, that they lack companionship and they're isolated. And according to an AARP survey, 30% of older adults said they lack companionship. And that can be one of the quickest things to not only your parent getting sicker, but also towards making financial mistakes. So all of those things are reasons to have a conversation about moving, downsizing sooner rather than later. And you want to try as much as possible to avoid the negatives of, look, you can't afford to stay here. You're not going to be able to take care of this place. That's all going to result in a more defensive reaction from your parents. There's going to be some of that they may that you may get into, but what you want to try to focus on are the positives of the move. Maybe they're going to be closer to family or closer to you, so you'll be able to keep an eye on things. If they move into some sort of continuing retirement care community, they're going to be more engaged with the community. There's going to have more friends, more social interaction, and that's incredibly important as you age. There's potential more financial flexibility, right? If you're able to downsize and you have a lot of equity in your home, you could spend more money they can spend more money on the things they want and also have more access to liquidity. Different retirement communities cater to a variety of different interests and other amenities. Some cater around golf or water activities or social events. And so again, highlighting the positives, focusing on the benefits of the move and doing the downsizing are going to get you a lot further than focusing on, you just can't stay here. It's not sustainable anymore. So there's lots of different housing options and downsizing options available. Some people, it may just be as simple as I'm going from a house to a condo, because when I leave, I just want to be able to lock the door and not have to worry about anything. If you want more advanced, there's more advanced options with more care abilities, active adult communities, people just 55 and older. There's a website, 55places.com, that provides annual lists of the 55 best adult retirement communities. Continuing care retirement communities is kind of an all-in-one package, and one of the bigger ones in the DC area that we have a number of clients at is the Goodwin House. You can choose from independent living to assisted living to even full nursing home memory care accommodations, all within one place. So it allows you to age in place. And this is very appealing because people can live completely independently there, but as they age, if they need more assistance, they don't have to move again. It's all built into those communities. Retirementliving.com is a good site to compare and contrast different CCRCs. Assisted living facilities, this is where you're not completely on your own, but you're also not in need of 24/7 care. So there are certain activities of daily living that your parent needs help with, but they can still do some things on their own. An assisted living facility is going to be a good option there. Memory care and nursing home are the most extreme forms of long-term care that are provided, right? A memory care unit is essentially securing a facility so that people with Alzheimer's or dementia do not wander out of the facility and basically, into the street or get lost. There's all sorts of potential problems where someone with Alzheimer's is living alone. And then nursing home, right? No one wants to ever think about going to a nursing home. There's horrible images that it conjures up. But, there are some people who eventually might need that. And it's basically where you're getting around the clock medical assistance and you're essentially not able to take care of yourself at all. And a good resource there is medicare.gov/nursing home compare. And you can compare different nursing home options and nursing home providers. So using a third party to facilitate this discussion, I think is a really smart thing to do. Because if you're, with some families, it may be fine. You can have the conversation, there's little resistance and you can get things done. But a lot of times there's, it's a very emotional topic and people aren't that comfortable talking about it. And so there's going to be resistance. And sometimes even after multiple attempts, you're not able to make much headway about them sharing about their finances and their plans. So you don't want to give up. You can try different things, including inviting parents or kids, but in this case, parents, to meet with your financial professional to let them know the planning you've done and what happens when you're gone. And you can use a financial planner or maybe a CPA, an estate attorney, a trusted friend to act as that kind of mediator, someone who can sit objectively and help the family have this conversation and talk about some more difficult things. So up to this point, we've really focused on talking to your parents about money, but the other side of the equation is paying it forward and talking to your kids about money. The research has shown that having open family meetings, open discussions with kids and parents is definitely a net benefit. Even though it goes against really our culture to talk about money so openly, it actually is a much healthier route to go and much more productive. And things will end up being carried out much more to your wishes by doing it that way. And the kids will have a lot less stress, having more clarity around what your financial situation was and what do you want. If you're unable to speak for yourself, what do you want after you've passed away? So the first thing you want to do here is make sure your financial house is in order, that you have up-to-date estate planning documents, you've done your financial planning, you've thought about and planned for long-term care expenses. Right, you want to make sure you have your financial house in order because your kids, right, they're going to model what you do more so than what you say. A couple different ways to do this. One is just to talk openly about your plans for retirement. What will you be doing in retirement? Will you travel a lot? Are you going to stay at home? Plan to stay in the home, but eventually sell it and downsize? Maybe you've looked at some financial planning or done some financial planning and it's going to be tight in retirement. You may have some financial challenges. Perhaps your kids are willing to help or able to help. It's better to give them time to prepare in advance rather than it being forced upon them in a time of crisis. Talk about with them where you want to live as you age, right? Do you want to stay in the home? Some people say, nope, I do not want to ever leave my home. Okay, that's fine. Talk about your final wishes. Do you want cremation versus burial? What type of service do you want? You'd be amazed also at the things adult children will fight about just because it was never discussed or mentioned in the will. But you may think, well, 98% of our money is in financial assets, and there's some family heirlooms or personal possessions that are important. My kids will work that out. Don't assume that. Don't assume that. It's naive to assume that kids won't fight over something like a dining room table or a bedroom set or a painting. They may have thought this mom and dad mentioned they were going to give this to me. You may have forgotten it, and then you don't specifically mention it. You don't want to have family fighting or tensions or bad memories created from something that could have been avoided. So when you're talking to your kids about money, I think it's really important to get to kind of the root of the issue. And so talking to them about what it was like for you growing up with money. Were you in a lower or higher socioeconomic class than your peers? Do you have specific memories of how money affected you growing up? What was some of the best financial decisions you ever made, and why? And what was maybe some of the poorer financial decisions you made, and what did you learn from that? Sharing your financial fears, your goals with your kids is an incredibly healthy exercise. And if they're unlikely to listen to you, you can always bring in someone like us, a financial planner or other third party, as an indirect way to start the conversation. But in our opinion, it's always better to over communicate with your adult children rather than under communicate. And as I said, you want to try as much as possible to look at the root causes. A lot of this is a lot of stuff when we're dealing with money and how people think about money. It is psychological. Okay. So we did a webinar on financial literacy for young adults that you should certainly check out if you haven't. But what we know when you're talking to your kids, what you have to remember is from how human beings are wired, a behavioral finance standpoint, humans are always more likely to take $1 today than $1.10 in the future, right? So we are not, it's not natural for humans to consider and plan for their future self, right? From an evolutionary perspective, people didn't know if they were going to be around 6 months, a year from now. And so they had to get a hold of as many resources they could now, but that's changed, obviously. So, keep that in mind when you're talking, when you're trying to explain to your kids the importance of saving, that there's going to be a natural inclination for them to want to keep more today because of just how we're wired. And make sure that you're aware that, depending on how they grew up, you didn't know some of this information. Most people don't talk about money except for when there's an issue. So the only time the child hears or thinks about money, it's when tensions are high and they've overheard the argument. And so think about that association with those kids in terms of how they start to grow up about money. A lot of parents say, and I myself am guilty of this, although I'm working on it, is your child asks for something and you say, we can't afford that. And really what you want to try to teach, what you want to say is that's not in our spending plan today, or, we spend our money differently than that. Counting is one of the most important behaviors. It's the beginning of all behavior change. And so when you start to count something, you automatically start to change your behavior unconsciously without realizing it. For people who have, perhaps more extreme issues, or you're really worried, maybe there's a gambling issue, a hoarding issue, something like that. Psychologists have said that keeping some sort of a spending diary, what were they feeling when they made the purchase? What did they purchase? How much did it cost? How did they feel afterwards? And then how did they feel a week later about the purchase? Those are some of the thoughts around when you're talking to your kids about money, some really helpful conversations to have. Okay. That is the end of the webinar. We really appreciate you attending. And if you have any questions, you can always reach us, josh@4jwealth.com, jeff@4jwealth.com, jamie@4jwealth.com, jen@4jwealth.com. But thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.